Yes, now we are.
Now.
Okay. Well, let me start again. It's January 11th, 2017, Helm developer call. The format is the core team will go through and give their stand-ups, and then we'll have any open discussion after that, starting with announcements. So as far as announcements, we released RC1 for 2.8 this week. So the target for 2.8 is going to be next week. There was at least one bug that we're looking into from that, which Taylor pinged me about. And then, actually, that's the only announcement. So with that, I'll kick it over to Fisher.
All right. So last week, aside from the typical issue triaging, commenting on issues and all of that, you, myself, and Taylor all went through the CFPs over the last week. And we've kind of gotten down to figuring out which talks and whatnot. So I think relatively soon we should be sending out the acceptance or the rejection is a hard word to say, or is a kind of a rude word to say, but they were all fantastic talks and all fantastic CFPs. So we just went through and trying to figure out which ones were right fit for the agenda. So that was basically all of last week, was figuring all of that out. This week going forward, there were some interesting, last night there was the owner's file thing, which I think, Matt Farina, you put up on the discussion topics for that. So I'll be interested to talk about what does the Kubernetes org want to do with that. And then the other thing that was on there, I'll let Matt Farina talk about those stuff. But that's basically my week and moving forward. Justin.
So I actually got to do some stuff, just some issue triage, some PR reviews. It was great. I would like to talk about CRDs at the end of this. We have time, and how we currently handle them and what can be done. But yeah, that's it for me. Nothing out of the ordinary. Taylor.
Okay, I'm here. Don't worry. I was just taking notes. So I was doing the same thing as Fisher was. So reviewing Helm CFPs and doing a lot of Helm Summit stuff. Big thanks to everyone who's been helping out, and Michelle, who's been coordinating a lot of it. I will also say that all the Helm CFPs were quite amazing. So good job to all of you out there. Even if your talk wasn't accepted, I mean, it was hard to decide. That was most of our time, was deciding which ones fit best, not actually if they were good enough to land or not. So I think all of that is in place. I'll be doing more of that, honestly, than this next week. I'll try to get back on any issues and stuff that I've been trying to comment on GitHub. And if anyone needs help with like second PR reviews or whatever, I can help out with that. But most of the stuff this week is going to be getting together the schedule and everything for, and then the notifications out and things updated on the Helm Summit landing page for the Helm Summit. So that's been kind of my whole week and probably this next week. Let's go over to Nick.
Hey guys, so last week did some reviews and also spent some time with Butcher putting together some material for teams at SUSE who are planning to step up using Helm. So they're kind of figuring out how to use Kubernetes for their internal applications and also want to use Helm. So putting together some material to tell them what Helm's about and how they can make use of it better. So want to figure out a little bit more about the issues are process and things like that. So I'll probably be reaching out to some of you folks for more information on getting onboarded. So I will pass it on to Michelle.
Hey, yeah, I've been working on the Helm Summit stuff, like Taylor mentioned. Thanks to the program committee for getting those CFP reviews in. We're working on iterating on the schedule, getting those notifications out. Karen, too, has been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on sponsorship packages, and that's been really interesting and a big learning process. So I'm just trying to make sure I support her as much as I can. So I'm doing that. All of next week is going to be a big week. The end of this week and next week are going to be a really big time for the Helm Summit planning stuff. After that, things should die down a little bit or quiet down a little bit. And so after that, I'll jump back into the issue in PRQ. Sorry for being a little absent. That's it for me, I think. Oh, if you're a core maintainer, there will be a little get together beforehand so we can just get our stuff together and or do a little organization and prepping for the Helm Summit. So the Helm Summit is the 21st and the 22nd. Core maintainers should try their best to be there the night before so we can get together around 6 o'clock in case you're booking travel. Matt Farina? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I just had to grab the unmute button. Just the stuff that I already have in the discussion topics. I think the one nice thing that got merged this week was to be able to specify supported Kubernetes versions. That kind of complements the capabilities stuff, but to look at Kubernetes versions and say, hey, this isn't supported yet, or this is supported later, that's going to be really nice over on the charts repo side of things. Otherwise, my stuff's in the discussion points. We can wait. Is there anybody else? Anybody hasn't gone?
I think that's everyone on the core maintainers group. Yeah.
I'm not on the core maintainers group. So I have no idea what's going on. So whoever's running the show.
Did Adam go?
No, I forgot I didn't go. I was already talking, so you guys don't want to hear from me again. Yeah, I was just doing the CFP stuff this week, as well as cutting the release. So end of this week and beginning of next week, it's going to be finalizing the CFP stuff that Matt and Taylor were talking about, and then getting ready for the 2.8 release. All right, did anybody else have discussion topics?
I just posted about this in the chat, but I came in a little bit late, so I don't know if this came before I got in, but during the charts call the other day, there was some discussion of proposed changes to the RBAC best practices, and I remember somebody said that we should bring that up on the Helm dev call. Did that get talked about already? Okay. Yep. There's an issue that I filed. Oh, hold on a second. Let me find it here.
And it was me who said this, by the way, and I totally forgot to add it, so thank you for coming and remembering.
That's what I do. I drink and I remember things.
Good show, sir.
It's one of the more recently filed issues. I'm constantly forgetting where all my tabs are, so bear with me. But it's an issue on the Helm project about basically what happened was there was a PR that Reinhard was working on for, I think, another project for JetStack to do a Helm chart, and they said, well, we think that RBAC should actually be done this way. And so I forget how I ended up getting into that discussion, but I looked at it and I said, they actually make some good points. Their proposal is that service accounts should be separated out from RBAC and treated separately and independently. And the more I looked at it, the more that made sense to me, especially because that allows us to do things like use charts that use multiple service accounts. So hold on while I find this proposal.
I found it. I just posted it in 3320.
Ah, that's the one. Yes, exactly. Live view of Kenzie remembering. That's great. But yes, that's the one. So I know the people on the charts call were asked to look at it, and I know there's some people on this call that weren't on the charts call. So that's probably a good place to discuss it, but I wanted to bring it up here just in case anybody had any quick thoughts.
I added it into the discussion topics. So, Adam, we can take it in whatever order you want. I just added it into the notes, though, so we don't miss anything.
We can go ahead and start with that one since we're already on there.
So yeah, I looked at an issue, commented on an issue too, and it was the same problem in that they wanted, it may have been the same issue, I don't know, but they wanted to Helm and it to fail, if it didn't, the service account, I think was the meat of it. And I was like, why is this a bug? Because it's in the documentation. I think Fisher, you were the one that bugged it. I was like, I don't know, but yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion either way. Something must be done though.
Sorry, you said that I pinged something?
Oh, you marked it as a bug, remember? And I was like, why is this a bug? Because it's in the documentation.
Oh, that specific issue. Okay.
Yeah, it was
Is
around.
that one related to this service account discussion?
Yeah, it's RBAC.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't so clear in the quick start that, how to deal with RBAC and give RBAC enabled kind of stuff. So a lot of this, the temporary solution might be to move the documentation up, and everywhere we've got a quick start, Helm and Knit documentation, we have to deal with RBAC.
Well, so if I'm understanding the thing that was open, the issue that was actually posted in the channel, in the chat, not the channel, is it saying that we would want Tiller to create the service account if there's RBAC resources in the chart? Is that a correct understanding?
That'd be a question for Kenzie and Matt, right?
Yeah, I'm currently reading through the back scroll because I'm not too familiar with I haven't gone through the whole issue yet. But
The thing about Tiller was Matt Butcher's comment, I think, and he wasn't on the charts call, and so we were hoping he'd be on this call.
Yeah, in the charts call, we had talked about if RBAC was set, if I remember right, to false, then you create the service account. Although it looks like there's been some other discussions. Reinhardt had changed it, but the idea is if there is, you can. It's the question of, do you create a service account per deploy for the cases you create them, or do you use the default service account? That was a big part of this. So how do you do it? Because if you deploy 100 things, you end up with 100 service accounts, but each service account is tailored towards that thing, which gives you a certain amount of control. Or how do you end up doing this with specifying a service account versus the default versus auto creating? What is the best practice? And this relates to RBAC because it deals with cases where you have or don't have RBAC. And then the service accounts related to those. And so what is the best practice we should have around this? And we've had a couple of different options discussed. I don't really have an opinion, which is why I said, let's bring it over here because it relates to Helm, and maybe getting more people involved will have an opinion on it. This might be something we also want to bring up at something like SIG apps as well, if we don't get strong opinions here, because some people there may know.
Well, I know that from a Kubernetes standpoint, most of the time, I just think about the controller manager, and the controller manager has a service account for each thing it does. And so I kind of think that it's not necessarily a bad idea to put in a different service account for each of those services that get created. I'm just not sure where that logic should lie. It kind of feels more like still it should be in a chart level thing, but I don't know if it's something that would work in Tiller or not. It's just initial thoughts.
If Tiller does something with it, I would like to see it still honor requested service account names rather than just always auto-generate one. That's one thing I feel pretty strongly about.
Oh yeah, I would agree if it were in Tiller. I wouldn't want it to override something that the user's asking for.
But did you say that creating an account on install was an option? So, you're talking about somebody who said it's not going to go segregated accounts, so every time you install something, you would get another account if you wanted to. That seems
Yeah,
good.
you could actually have that. In fact, you can do that with a chart today, right? So in the chart, you could say service account name. And if nobody supplies a service account name, like it's an empty field, you do an if statement. And if it's not there, then you automatically generate one. And you could do something based on like the release name, which is, already checked to be unique. You could create a service account based on that for it. And then you could also know to clean up for that later if it was deleted and purged. But you could do that today just in logic in a chart.
Did not realize that.
Charts are getting very meta these days, where it's not just find and replace or optional things. You're actually seeing programming logic start to show up in there to do some neat stuff.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I've definitely noticed is that a lot of people are. It seems like these kind of use cases, in the sense of branching control logic, seems to be very common in chart templates. And I'm not sure if YAML is really the right option for everyone anymore.
All right, let's steer us back on track here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
What I was saying, I think that I like the idea of having it like that be a best practice for the chart. The more I think about it, the more I would not want to put it in Tiller, because then the Tiller implementation becomes highly coupled to the chart implementation about this, like how the service account will be generated or what the name is or any of that type of stuff. And anytime, if we needed to make some change to the service account, we'd have to make the change in Helm and not in the charts individually. So I would think that I think it's a good idea to start supporting that, have that kind of be a common thing, that by default charts will be creating their own service account, but that will be part of the chart definition, not inside of Tiller. That's my feel.
That's kind of where I am too.
Okay, and just a quick check here. We still have 3 more discussion topics and a little over 5 minutes. So,
well, I think that was probably a conclusion, unless anyone had any other thoughts. So,
Sounds good to me.
All right, Farina.
All right, so the first one, I'll be quick. Helm uses labels, particularly in charts, and the app dev working group has been working on kind of a common label strategy to try to make labels on stuff more cross-cutting. If we can all agree on a bunch of labels, then other things like UIs not related to Helm or any other project can also pick those things up and do interesting things, right? You could have a UI that actually showed you, here's all the resources for a particular application or for a particular subpart of an application. And you can start doing some neat visualization things. And it doesn't really matter if it's Helm or something unrelated to it. There's a bunch of people who wanted this. And so one of the things that's coming out of the app dev working group is a proposed label and annotation recommendation that would go up as documentation up on Kubernetes docs. And you're going to see that there's some changes here in how it relates to Helm. And so what we're really looking for at this point is really final feedback, in particular from the Helm folks, because it can impact you. Or us. And if you look on here, we actually talk about, because everything's namespaced, because, and how Helm can be different from common ones and things like that. I actually use Helm as an example of namespace a particular app when they have their own things that are above and beyond the common ones. And so if y'all could provide feedback, we'll bring it up again at SIG Apps, but I'm just putting it out there and asking you all to really go take a look at this and weigh in on it and curse the names of the people who wanted this, if that's how you feel. And that's all I had on that one. The next one was more the Kubernetes tooling I wanted to get at and the owner's file change. And so I'll move right into that. The owner's files and the change for that, there is kind of this movement, and I'm pushing back and asking why and to justify it, to make everybody use the testing infra tools, as many of them as they choose. I'm more of a self-service kind of person, and I know other people have expressed that as well to me, and so I'm pushing back a little bit on it. But some of the tools may end up being useful, and one of them, and I'm not sure how it came across, but Aaron wanted to say, hey, could Helm look at using this? Not to force anybody to use it, but to bring it up, was to use owner's files and looks good to me / approve. And those things. And really what that does, and I don't know if anybody knows how this works, and so I'll just go real quick for those who don't. If you have an owner's file in a directory and it specifies GitHub handles, you have approvers and reviewers. Reviewers can be requested by a tool. So if that section of code is touched, the tooling can say, hey, a PR that touches that, go off and request review from 2 people who are in the reviewers list that touch those pieces of code. So it automatically randomly picks reviewers from those reviewers lists and says, hey, go off and poke these people because they've agreed to be reviewers for this section of code. It can be a whole code base. It can be a single directory and all subdirectories of that. It's totally up to whoever's here. Approvers can use tooling to say, hey, we can merge for this section of code. It was designed for the Kubernetes monstrosity that's this huge mega repo, and people really only being able to merge code for some small sections in the subdirectories. But it can apply to lots of other things. On charts, we're letting actual chart owners manage their own charts now by having an owner's file in that chart. And the 2 commands that can go along with this are looks good to me and approve. If you are an approver and you do /looks good to me, then what it does is it automatically, it's an implicit approval. And so it gives you looks good to me and approval. Looks good to me is what a reviewer does. Approve is what an approver does. Pretty much everybody just ever has to do is /looks good to me and you're good. Places like Kubernetes, they'll use both. But that kind of gets it to, that's kind of what's going on here, right? And it's tooling for that. And I don't know if it's useful or not, but it lets you in code enforce who can go do things. And that's the approver sections and the reviewer sections in an owner's file. An owner aliases just let you do aliases on top of those for groupings. So that's what those tools are. I don't know if they would be useful here or if anybody's interested in them, but that's kind of where Aaron's coming at this, is how do you go about that kind of thing? And so that's his proposal. And does anybody have questions about how this works? Because I just gave a quick tutorial.
No, that was very helpful. Honestly, I was missing kind of the backdrop on a lot of this, in the sense that I thought that this is kind of like being implemented across the entire Kubernetes org, and it's just kind of like being enforced, and we all have to use this now, which is kind of like where some of my comments did stem from, which I don't necessarily agree. But if it's more of like a showcase to say these are kind of cool tools that are going on, and you may or may not want to take a look at this, then I'm all for that. Like, I'm all for showcasing new tooling. But it came off as more of, this is something that the Kubernetes org is doing, and this is what we're doing across the entire repository, as opposed to being like, hey, Kubernetes people,
Well,
this is what we're doing.
Well, it depends on who you ask, right?
Right.
Is it going to be enforced for everybody or not? Or is it self-service, right? I don't actually have the answer to that yet. I've started to push back and ask that question because a handful of people have decided to just start, like, you notice your labels have changed automatically for you over time, right? And there's actually talk of removing the standard labels, and so some of your labels may disappear. And it's not going out to all the repo owners for discussion. These conversations aren't happening. It's a small group of people that are saying, we're going to go do this, and then they implement it because they have access to. But even when they did the last change for stale handling, they didn't even go after the Kubernetes dev list and just go announce it. They didn't go around and even start telling people. It just started showing up, and some people were like, what's going on here? Why did this happen? Because they didn't know, it wasn't communicated. And so it really is. And so if you don't like this handling, now that you understand how it works, or it's not something you want to use, please let folks know that you would prefer to opt out of it, and give your reason why. Because I don't know that people get enough of those opinions, and there isn't enough of that broader conversation on this tooling. So it's probably useful, if you have feelings on it, to give those opinions.
If we were interested in directing those opinions in per se for the labeling that automatically occurred across all Kubernetes org repos, where do we best engage with? I'm guessing this is the steering community that's coming through this, or is this the test infra?
Test infra. Test infra.
Okay.
So if you contact their repo and file an issue or something like this, I just filed an issue to push back a little to see what happens by suggesting that stale handling should be configurable per repo and not 90 days across the board for everybody. And in the proposal, there's a proposal out right now for SIGs to get orgs. I've suggested that maybe the tooling should be opt-in, so people can opt into what they want rather than mandatory, which is what was originally in that proposal. CLA bot has to be mandatory for legal reasons, but the other tooling doesn't necessarily need to be. And so I'm starting to just push back. But I've had a number of people tell me things, and what I would really appreciate is if other people have feelings on this, they need to hear from more voices, particularly those from a wider breadth of projects, rather than people telling me in back channels and me conveying it, so they see that it's not one guy. Because I do protect anybody who comes to me in a side channel. I don't share your name with people unless you tell me. And so I'll be like, I'm sorry, I can't tell you who said this to me, when I'm conversing on ideas. So please, if you have feelings, share them. And the reason, if you've got questions about these, because there's actually a whole bunch of tools they have. Some of them might be useful, some of them may not. Some of them with a tweak could be useful, and it's all open. We can go work on those. It's, it is a place we can engage, and so please do.
So where do we engage them at again? I'm trying to capture that in the notes properly.
GitHub.com/kubernetes/test-infra.
Okay, I'll add that in.
Thank you.
All right, and we're a couple minutes over. Did you want to give a quick pitch on CRDs, or did you want to discuss it next week?
We can discuss it next week. Okay, just up and down. Can we change the implementation of the validation install piece in Tiller, or has this already been tried over and we're not changing anything? And because right now there's a validation pass and then there's an install pass, and then CRDs, obviously you can't add a namespace while you're installing everything, because it's a one-shot deal as far as like one big manifest. So is it open to refactoring, do we think? Or
Anything can be changed.
yes, good answer. I already started playing with it. I was like, it's getting a little hairier than, I wasn't sure if we'd already been over this or whatever.
Yeah, the validation stuff has some quirks in it, like where it is in the logic, and like it especially has some places that could use some work around updates and failed deployments, making sure you don't revalidate failed stuff. And so yeah, it could definitely use some refactoring. So if there's something that can help that process along, yeah, definitely open to it.
Yeah, I was thinking it might take, special case for CRD to say, since it's adding a namespace, we have to extract it first and validate it first, whatever. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know about special casing, but I was thinking it would be nice if the validation step actually looked at the assets that have been rendered but not installed, and then used them in its calculations of what will be valid.
The problem is, I was doing that. I was already trying that, and the problem is it uses system build or a builder from Kubernetes to validate the manifest. So it doesn't work because it's all one doc. So I made it past the check, by extracting the CRD namespace, adding it to the list, and then it was like fine. And then, but
it is possible to disable it. It would just take some refactoring, because you can bypass the validation and still get the resources, and then you can do a validation later on it. So it is possible to do.
Cool. Yeah, I get more time. I'll look into this more.
Because the other thing I was thinking is, doesn't that then open up the possibility that people could deploy actual API extensions with Helm?
Right. Yeah. I mean, CRDs are just blowing up, right? I know there's operators everywhere, and even some of this Cola, Kubernetes, OpenStack stuff. I was a part of needing it, So, yeah, it'd be nice to be able to install CRDs very easily, without having to do install hook or whatever. Craziness, backflips. Cool.
Awesome.
I have one more comment real quick. By the way, back to my other discussion, I forgot there was a pertinent piece of information I didn't share. If you use Kubernetes tooling to merge things, you can have tests that will run right before the bot merges it as well. It's the same test that it would run normally, so it could run a test, and then it could rerun that right before it merges and choose whether to not merge it because the test failed. And I don't know if that's useful, but that having one last time on charts, we use it to verify that the version was actually incremented. So something didn't increment the version for a chart in between. We say, is this chart's version increment still valid? We can do things like that as well right before it merges it. So that's it. That's another thing the tooling does give you if you use that. And I forgot, because that turned out to be useful for us. That's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, we're 6 minutes over, so we should probably.
Issue Maharaja, or Maharaja,
Yeah.
or Czar, or Butler. I know that Nick said he wanted to learn so he could shadow whoever's doing it.
Yeah, I'm still up for doing it. I'm not fully confident in what exactly it involves, and I'm not sure I have all permissions quite yet. So I will follow up, and I'm more than happy to shadow somebody who's doing it and learn. So
Nick, why don't you and we can shadow and pair together. I'll be a little slower on the responses, and then maybe once or twice a week we can pair together and we can go through the process. So then you have an understanding.
that sounds great. I'll ping you offline on Slack.
Okay. Cool.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Matt.
All right. Anybody want to do notes?
I'll do notes next time.
Okay. And lead.
Me, I got it.
All right. Cool. All right. I think that's it. Everybody enjoy your Thursday.
Cool. Thanks, guys. See ya.